let's design a new feature for the Classic City site today. So, talk about design drift all the time, right? As your website grows and expands, things start to look different. How do you tangibly stop that? So I wanted to walk you through this today because this element over here that you're looking at is something that I brought in a little while ago, actually. And by the way, kudos to the guys over at Fletch PMM. They designed something that looked very similar to this, almost identical to this. And then kind of publicized it out to the world. They're like, hey, agencies should be more transparent with their pricing. Take this idea and run with it. And so I did. And so this has been live now for a few weeks, and I've had a handful of sales conversations over that time. And this has definitely added a lot of clarity. So from an agency perspective, 10 out of 10 recommend. Now, the problem that I have had is that websites are complex. They aren't just as simple to boil down to a page count and a couple of specific types of custom functionality. So like even what I have here, like on this right-hand sidebar, is this is a little bit too simple for what we're looking for. So I wanted to figure out, how do I expand this without it looking like a wall of text? Because we already have a wall of text here. And obviously we have things that are bolded that are, key things to look at. So you don't really have to read all of the details underneath it. But how could I show better detailed pricing without the overwhelm, but also have a lot more information here too? So I figured, I'm thinking through this today, why not journal about it? So one of the first things I looked at was, I actually went over to the Slack website, and I really like what they're doing here. And so I'm obviously comparing a software company to an agency, so there's going to be some differences. But one of the things that I like is they have a lot of details inside of here, which I know that I'm going to need. But I also know that each of these details are going to have different elements. So like, for example, the top bullet point here is about 90 days of message history, and then it transitions to unlimited, unlimited, unlimited. One-to-one external messages, group. So like there's differences within each of these checkboxes. And I know, like for example, page counts, those are going to be different every single time. Or for each of these different tiers, more than likely. And the custom functionality that we're going to build into websites is also very much different from a site-to-site basis. And so like for here, I basically hone in on case studies and then case studies and testimonials. Whereas if we're not building a B2B services website, those things don't necessarily matter as much. Yes, I realize there's other verticals that might utilize those. And just because it's case studies and testimonials does not necessarily mean it's going to jump the price up. So how do we showcase different functionality throughout this like pricing pod or this pricing table, if you will, with it still being legible? And so what I want to think through here a little bit is, I'm actually going to drag my iPad over. So let's think about this for a second. So we have things like page count, right? As one thing. We have custom functionality, right? That's a huge. This is a huge bucket. Things that could fall underneath this would be things like event management. We obviously have case studies, testimonials. We also have things. What else would be under here? Everything is so different. Possibly like if there's ways to template like industry pages. could also think of things like knowledge base. A lot of people have third-party platforms for knowledge bases, but sometimes we have that embedded in here. Portfolio pieces as well too. We then, I'm actually going to call this, I'm actually going to change this name. This isn't really custom functionality. This is more of, oops, wrong ones. This is more of content types that we have. That's a better way to phrase that. But then you do have sometimes custom functionality. And the gambit here is going to be extraordinarily wide. But, whether it's like custom API connections, are we going to be doing anything unique with the CRM other than just installing a tracking code or like embedding a form? Is there stuff that we need to be able to track page by page? Are we doing anything like password protecting whole segments? Like, do we need to do like user management and stuff like that? And then also in terms of like going back to kind of like the CRM and stuff, this is where one thing could turn very easily into like 3 or 4 things. We're just going to call this like tracking. Are we doing obviously things like simple like Google Analytics? And obviously that's just an embed most of the time. But do we have special types of tracking set up to where when a new website launches, some of that tracking will have to get redone? Obviously here we also have things like CRMs. We also have like heat maps and stuff like that. Like Lucky Orange, Microsoft Clarity, those types of things. And then also just like the whole like Google Tag Manager, that whole scripting library, what all is necessary. Also, do we have any like third-party tools, like things like chatbots? Which I realize isn't really tracking. I think this tracking is probably a better way, like probably do something like script management. Oops. My handwriting is wonderful, isn't it? Chatbots. What else would there be? I know a lot of folks use something like CallRail for dynamic phone numbers and things on those lines. So we have all of these pieces that come together. And then also let's just look at design technical. Like from the design side of things, how intricate are we getting? Do you have a brand guide already? Or do you simply just like your logo? We don't do branding, but having something like that ahead of time is going to be a key piece of how in-depth the design is going to be. People say a lot of times, you want simple design practices, but what does simple actually mean to you? So how much animation are we going to be bringing into the picture here? Are we going to be bringing in video assets? And how are we going to tie those in together? All of these things, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we would need to put in here. I'm thinking through a couple of the last things that we've talked about. Also, and this is not something that we would add like on the actual like pricing piece, but there is an element of what is the committee, and I have no idea how to spell. I think there's 2 M's. What is your like team structure going to look like that's going to be managing this process? Working with a single person on a web design process is a lot simpler than working with an entire team the entire time through. And so the question is, how do we go from this level of complexity and add a little bit more detail than this, but give us the ability to showcase in a simple way items being checked off and ballpark prices? Because I'm a strong believer that yes, everything is custom priced. Yes, there is a custom scope with pretty much every single website. But how can we get 75 to 80% of the way there using the design system that we have here. So let's start thinking first about what are the line items on this going to be. So we have page count is going to be one of them. We have, I'm going to say, so then also blog, because by default blogs are pretty much standard at this point, right? So we have our blog. These will basically be, so like if we're thinking of like a table of tiered pricing, right? I'm going to draw this out. This would kind of, the answers within here would be like a number. Blog would just be like a checkbox, basically. Like, yes, this is going to happen. I'd also say that within a project, we would have like a meeting cadence as well. And so like this would be like bi-weekly, weekly, weekly. And I don't know, all these things, these like data points, these are probably all going to change. And this is probably not going to be the layout that we end up going with. But I want to start getting down kind of like what is the content that needs to be here. We have our meeting cadences. I'm going to put script management. It's just check, check, check. And there will probably be like some sort of like information icons that kind of like bubble effectively here that like provide a little bit more detail. So script management, I'm going to say, in WordPress are called custom post types, but I'm going to call these content types from above. So under the basic one, probably be 0. Under this one, we probably do 1, and this one we probably do 2. So basically, there's more different types of content. There's a difference for pages in particular, because there's some sites that have, 200-300 pages. Not all of them need this like manual curation. And I'm all about how do you take a very complex sitemap and how do you simplify it when you're doing a redesign. So I'm actually going to divide this out some. So I'm actually going to say, I'm going to call this like handcrafted pages. Like these are like the key pages within the sitemap that are mission critical to the majority of your customers. And so here I'm going to probably say like 5 to 7, 8 to 15, 16 plus. And then I don't know what I want to call this quite yet, but this is going to be like the migratable pages. And this will probably be something along the lines of like less than 15, 16 to 30, and 31 plus. I'm like, those are the pages that are like the detail pages, right? Like they're the ones where you're diving into something very minute that not a lot of people care about, but if they do, they want to know the technical information around like, yes, these people understand my core challenge. And so we'll need to divide that out a little bit differently. I don't know if those are going to be the names and phrases that we go with. Then we also have our block library, obviously. And so here on the basic side, we'll probably go with our 12 standard ones that we have. 12 to 15, and then 15 plus, and these kind of start getting into more like the custom route. Let's see. Let's go back over here. We did script management. We'll do a line for custom API integration. This would be no, this would be no, this would be yes. And the thing is, what's interesting about stuff like this is that with this custom functionality, sometimes it's extraordinarily simple and it actually saves time. So the interesting part about thinking about how do you build this out is that at the end of the day, some of these things are swappable, because like, let's say that you have a 31 plus page site, but you can integrate an API with it in some way, shape, or form. Well, then it actually might be simpler to just build it out via the API and might not actually take nearly as long as it would to like migrate in 30 plus pages of content. So this is just the intricacies of like thinking about all this type of stuff and how long all this stuff takes. API CRM, password protect. Oh yeah, are we going to be doing any kind of like user management? So let's go back over here. User management. Wow, my handwriting is bad. Check, like that. E-commerce, I want to have e-commerce as an option because we do e-commerce, but we do it all up and down. So the price point for just like, is this an e-commerce site? It can be here, but it could also be all the way over here. So just like the simple fact of e-commerce doesn't matter. It's more of how does e-commerce play with the rest of the site? If the rest of the site doesn't have handcrafted pages and migratable pages and different content types and blogs and all this kind of jazz, like it's a basic e-commerce site, then it might actually fall down toward the lower tier. So again, information architecture when thinking about this is key. And the idea, like I was saying before, is to simplify. Let's go back up top. So we talked about content types and things like that, knowledge base. These are all page types and stuff. So those are all in there. And so like when we're thinking, going back over here to content types, like information has to be available. So like when we're thinking about the design of this, I can't just have 0, 1, and 2 listed out. There has to be information regarding like some sample ideas and things along those lines. So especially when we're looking at something like, let's go back over here to Slack, layout, is that it's going to be hard to list like examples here. Like if this simply was just handcrafted pages, check. And then the number 5 to 7 or 8 to 15 was hiding inside of this little box, that's not very scannable. So we need to think of a way as we're laying out, like, what does one of these columns or pods look like that we showcase the right information that is available, but still having more details available to us as well. Let's go ahead and move this over now. So while I laid this out kind of like as like a 4-column approach where there would be like headers. Oops, that's a highlighter. Let's not do that. There would be headers above this to where this is like low, medium, high, for lack of nicer terminology. We'll come up with better phrases for that. The idea would be to have this like left-hand column on the side. But I don't know if that's the layout that we want to go with. So now we start thinking about like, how do we want to, we have kind of all the data. We've word vomited all of that out, right? How do we think about design with this? And we have building blocks at our disposal. So I'll go ahead and drag back over the website here. Like we have this style, and actually this style might actually work out really well. So like we have this one singular contained block with these like dashed lines in between each of the columns. So one of my thinkings is that we actually take this core layout where the entire pricing table is just 3 equal columns with the dashed lines in between the columns. And then we have our high, medium, and low here. So we actually nix the idea of this like left sidebar sort of deal. And we basically just kind of put it in their own like 3 columns. The thing is though, we are going to have repetitious data. So kind of like with Slack, it's group meetings, group meetings, group meetings, group external meetings, external meetings, external meetings. Like, so you're going to have all of this. So the question is, how do we visibly display this to where the information that's exactly the same is not visually overwhelming, and the information that is different gets some level of emphasis? Not large, but something to where it does call attention to it. because there is an ease of this to where with how they grade out the items that you don't get within each of these packages, you can kind of glance, you kind of understand like the increases that happen. So how do we want to design this? I'm actually going to kind of pull up both of these at the same time here. I'm going to drag this over here like that so that I can see it. So the way that I'm thinking is if we have one single column here where we have at the very top of it, the pricing tier doesn't matter as much. Like you see like on Slack, you see like pro and business over here. Like these don't really matter. People kind of know there's this intrinsic knowledge like pricing either increases or decreases as you're watching a table. So we'll have the pricing tier kind of in bold up at the top here, but small. And then I think a general price range is probably going to be better than just a single price. So we'll say this is $15,000 to $20,000 one time. And then maybe like no long-term commitment. On long-term commitment? Kind of the opposite of what I'm going for there. No long-term commitment. So that's kind of the header section. And then below, and also where do you want your calls to action? That's another thought too. So I'm not gonna worry about the CTA at the moment because I think the getting the details of this right is actually gonna be the most important piece here. Is we're going to need to have these kind of headers kind of duplicated down. So what I'm thinking that we do is that we actually kind of go something similar with the pricing tiers over here to where it's like, okay, we want to say, actually, can I zoom in on this a little bit? No, I cannot. Sad days. I'm going to call this handcrafted pages. So that'll be nice and bold, kind of maybe even like all caps. And then below it would be slightly larger of 1 to 7 pages of the sitemap. 1 to 7 pages. I'm just going to put a box around it to make it look like it's a little bit more highlighted. And actually, I should undo that really quick. I want to have the icon on the left-hand side. So we would probably go with some sort of a checkbox here. We would say HC pages. And then in slightly larger paragraph text. Pages. This would be like custom built, effectively. And then the next one down would be meeting cadences. And then this would say biweekly and like regular sized paragraph text. And so kind of rinsing and repeating that down the page so that when you look at this next one, all of this stuff is in alignment. You still see the checkbox with the circle. You see HCP. So you kind of glaze over that. This would then say 8 to 15 pages built. Because we already have in our style system, we already have kind of what the icon looks like, the coloration for, like, this is actually very, like, this would be a little bit tighter. So given that we have so much information here, this font size would actually probably be a little bit closer to this font size down here to get it nice and small. This would be even smaller. And then with your checkbox or not, and then do some coloration as well. So anything that has like an X next to it, like it's not included, would just be grayed out very similarly to Slack. I like that idea. And then we'd have to figure, another piece is, do we want to highlight like a primary one to focus in on? When you're software, you have you're doing a lot of very quick comparisons, and this is where we're a little bit different, right? Like we're building something that's a little bit larger. We're not making kind of a gut decision on a $9 a month plan here. So do we want to have something that is in fact highlighted? And I don't know. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start building out what this could possibly look like. And so I'll hop back in here in a moment when I kind of have the baseline of version 1, because this is an iterative process at the end of the day. So I will be right back.